Okay, sweet. So here we are. It is Sunday, April 29th, right?
Yep.
And we're here with James Kubie for his exhibition Blood and Gold at Julius Caesar in Chicago. And that's all I have to say. James, take it away. We'll start your PowerPoint not so smoothly.
Yes. PowerPoint
Okay.
is the future.
It is the past, my friend.
All right. Thank you guys for coming. This project, Blood and Gold, is my last project in Chicago. I was very, very excited when Mr. Naka asked me if I would do this. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of where I was starting with, I'm a professional baker. That's what I do for the vast majority of my waking hours. And I have been really kind of enamored with eggs as of late. Not only do I bake in a bakery, a restaurant, but I also bake for an organization called Ile Osakan, which is a Afro-Cuban house of Santeria. And so I am what is called an alache. I've been training for the last 5 years. I've been here in Chicago to be their sacred cook. And one of the things that they had me prepare are they're essentially meringues, egg white cookies that we're all kind of familiar with, that are light and fluffy and delicious. But they use them specifically as a symbol of food for the soul. So when I started this project, I wanted to work with eggs, but as I was working with egg whites, I was getting rid of a lot of egg yolks. And so I wanted to figure out what it is about the whole egg, not necessarily mixed together, but separate, the egg white and the yolk. That was interesting. And it really is kind of the quintessential symbol for what the soul needs, or what the life needs. The egg white acts as the amniotic fluid for the potential life. It is the breath, whereas the yolk is the nutrition, and it is what nourishes this burgeoning creature. So I wanted to make an object that I could house a piece of my own soul. And so this is Cake AB, and it is made completely out of egg whites, sugar, my blood, and 23 karat gold leaf. The thing that I'm really excited about with this cake, I get so if you guys are here for the opening, I was just giddy over exactly how this is put together, because it was a feat. The base of the cake, the white part, is made entirely out of meringues. There's no flour. It's supported completely by egg whites and sugar. And through a process of baking that took 72 hours over 3 weeks, I was able to get this meringue to be hard like porcelain. And sitting on top of the meringue is a disc of hard candy that's made of sugar and my blood. You can see the disc a little better here. It was really fascinating to me that the process of making hard candy is extracting all of the water from sugar. And so what hard candy is, or this particular piece of hard candy, is sugar crystals with blood platelets suspended in it, just through the process of casting it. That's the back, because I thought it was pretty enough for a picture. But not wanting to forget the egg yolks, I wanted to make something where the audience could participate in this project as well. So this is Cake AU, and there were individual cakes made out of flour, egg yolks, sugar, and 23 karat gold. There's nothing else in this cake. Oh, there's butter. And so when people came to the opening, they were able to eat their own little cake and mingle and participate in the project. But little did they know, as the project commenced throughout the month, they were taking an active role in my laboratory experiment. There's a little detail. So the day after the opening, I came in and I broke up the cake and I started to melt it down. And for the next 2 weeks, I fermented the syrup in a carboy so that as yeast broke down these sugars and turned them into fuel for them to live, they released alcohol and created essentially a moonshine. So a little detail of how active the yeast were on the first day. 2 weeks later, I came back. Well, I came back every other day or so to check on the progress and to check the temperature and to see how everything was progressing. But it wasn't completely done until this week, where I filtered out all the alcohol from the alcohol in the water from this moonshine and ran it through my still. So, as you can see, I have the moonshine as it is, or the mash, sitting in a bath of water at 200 degrees, just below the boiling point of water, but above the boiling point of alcohol. And so all the little bubbles that are on the surface of this liquid is the alcohol escaping from the water. And it ran through my condenser of copper tubing and ice cubes and condensed into this beautiful yellow liquid that we have here, which was, it was quite a surprise actually that turned out yellow, as we were discussing earlier. So yeah, those are the photos of the process. I just want to kind of go over what exactly happened here over the last 3 weeks before we kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on, possibly. So wanting to make this cake was really a personal project because I deeply, deeply love Chicago, but I am moving in the next couple months and I wanted to leave a part of myself that was both ephemeral and very permanent here in the city. So I wanted to extract my soul somehow. And I figured that the best way to do that would be to take a portion of my body and then purify it until I could get it to its basis level, which would be pure alcohol, and then either evaporate it off or burn it off. I wasn't entirely sure how it would work out, and I was very surprised that my alcohol, that was this image of my soul that I wanted to be clean and pristine, came out yellow and kind of smelly, very, dare I say, urine-like. But nonetheless, I am going to process it a little bit more so that I can get a cleaner burning fuel that I will then ignite and then burn off into the city so that it's forever here and nobody can ever extract it. So, conversation. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but does anybody have any questions about the process or?
Are you explicitly interested in notions of alchemy?
Absolutely.
Yes. So I would say you probably already didn't hear the word, but almost you don't even need to say it almost.
Right.
It's so squarely in that. I've been reading this book about alchemy stuff, and one thing I didn't realize is how I always thought about it in terms of a purification process, but how the putrefaction process, how important that is too.
Absolutely.
Which is, I guess, kind of like making a mash is sort of becoming putrefied in some sense.
Yeah, and the thing that attracts me to alchemy is how manual the process is, it's this like highly spiritual endeavor to undertake, but it's very mundane, you know, as far as, you know, very process based, almost scientific, but so completely anti-scientific.
Yeah.
And it, like, just sitting here and being with the alcohol as it's steaming and condensing, that is the biggest part of the alchemist's process, to hopefully imbibing the vapor, the alcohol vapor, with intent.
Have you imbibed it?
Oh, that no. I figured it came from my body. I'm not necessarily sure it needs to go back in my body. And
well, actually, I've been reading James Elkins's book on alchemy and painting. Actually, I just finished the chapter basically that's about incest.
Yeah.
And talking about how he thinks there's a part of alchemy that is based on this way he's saying painting. You know, painting is it's self-reflexiveness about, like, you know, a painter making a painting. It's also about paint. Is a corollary to, like, if you want to go really deep in alchemy, incest is the way to go.
Right.
And so maybe, you know,
because it's about the separation that we come back.
I guess so. Yeah. So.
So incest with the twin is like.
Well, but even incest stuff with yourself, like with just like this came from you, like, and I think what you're identifying is sort of like that would be kind of wrong. This is precisely why it would be right, you know, in a certain way. I don't know. I'm not daring you to drink your own. Do it.
No, that's really, really interesting. You know, I was interested in the way that the body breaks down these materials in the same way, and so when viewers came and they ate the cakes, like, while I was here doing the work on my cake that was part of my body, this kind of twin of it, the part that is the same and yet completely different, the absolute opposite, was being broken down in the exact same way in people's bodies, you know, throughout the city. And I was just really fascinated by people carrying my little experiment around with them for even just a short time inside of them. One thing with my art is that if we get down to the pure basics of it, is I'm always trying to figure out how to manipulate the soul through the physical body. My entire family, I'm from Georgia. My entire family are, excluding my parents, my immediate family removed, but everybody else, they are Pentecostal faith healers. And so I kind of grew up in this environment where there's a lot of reaction to the invisible that I didn't necessarily understand, and I wanted to see what everybody was freaking out about. I wanted to see this thing that was happening that I wasn't seeing. It made me feel like I was outside of it. So my art practice is entirely about making things that I can see and I can touch with my own hands, and then also that other people can go and experience it through their own bodies.
Can you talk about alchemy a little bit? I know we just did, but I'm not that familiar with alchemy.
Sure.
And I know something about alchemy from the Harry Potter book.
Right.
But sort of like, yeah, like an expanded view of alchemy.
Sure.
I'm just curious, because I guess, like, I mean, I know it's sort of like transmuting one thing into another thing, but is it always spiritual? Is that built into it?
The alchemy is the spiritual part. The laboratory experiment is just the dervish that you're making your hands perform. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? You're busying your physical self so that your soul can move through the same process. I'm not a student of alchemy by any means, but I just find it so fascinating that other people felt this drive that they needed to work their own bodies in order to work their spirits.
And is it traditionally always been something that's bodily, like a thing that comes from a person and then is transmuted, or is it?
There are three kinds of alchemy. There is mineral alchemy, the whole gold, led into gold idea. There is plant alchemy, which uses extracts and fermentation and putrefaction to make medicines. And a lot of times those have the blood of the person that's intended to ingest it inside of it. Mm-hmm. But there's also animal alchemy, and animal alchemy is something that you won't ever find a lot of information on because people kind of eschewed it as evil. In the Middle Ages, if you were putrefying big bins of corpses, that was kind of frowned upon. But there are, like, the experiments that do exist that you can read about are based on bodily fluids that come from something that's still alive. So, like, your own urine or your own blood. But it's definitely kind of the forgotten stepchild of alchemy, because it didn't produce anything except for knowledge. It didn't have this, promise of wealth, or necessarily health that the plant medicines being produced did.
So then is a lot of is the outcome always judged on, in some ways, the end product, or does it have to do with the process equally, or is there sort of different ways of looking at it?
It's entirely the process.
Okay.
The items that are left over, generally, like an actual alchemist who is practicing today in the city of Chicago would produce something like this after maybe 2 or 3 years of work. And it's a very long process that they're doing to really control it. This is essentially step one for them. They would then macerate it with more whatever they're using, and so it has all of this potency or value in it because of the work that's put in, just like a painting, or. It's the work that's in it that makes it valuable, even if it looks like a piece of dried dog crap or something like that, because it's been so worked and baked and
I read about like an experiment where they did this kind of thing and then dissolved it until there was just like basically a salt, and then they scraped that up and then did more shit with it, and then they do end up with these things that look like you said, like dog shit. These little nodules of like hardened, waxy things.
And the whole process is so they get it down. So they get it down to the salts, and then they add it back to the stuff that they took it out of. And it's this whole process of separating and recombining over and over and over again until they're able to completely turn it into something, at least visually and physically, different.
Can you talk a little bit about choosing blood? Any other bodily fluid, or like a combination? Like, is it kind of aligning with the traditional alchemy, like you were saying, blood being a part of plant alchemy, or did you have some personal affinity to choosing blood over all or any other bodily fluid?
Blood was definitely really important, necessarily, or specifically to me as a person. I have had a lot of issues with my blood growing up. I was an indoor kid, so I suffered from a lot of nosebleeds, and they were really, really kind of awful, and it would happen at any point of any day, if not every day. And so I was always really embarrassed about having blood on my face. And so when I started making art, when I went to school and started making performance, it was all kind of centered around me choosing to show my blood in the way I chose to do it. So it wouldn't be a surprise anymore. I could, take back my my bodily fluids. And so I did that for a good 4 years, and I wasn't getting anything out of it except for maybe feeling a little more comfortable. My art definitely wasn't very interesting. So that's when I moved on to using either plant-based materials that resembled flesh, or using animals in the place of my own body fluids. And so when I started working on this particular project and I was using these eggs as a symbol, I decided I needed to kind of go back to my original way of thinking and use some of my original materials and see if I can break them down into something that no longer resembled them in any way at all.
I was going to ask you about that because you sort of like adorned your soul. If the blood is your soul, you added the gold and all this other stuff. Is that just a part of the, like, how did you sort of decide on gold or the sort of constituent elements, I guess?
Well, starting from a point of alchemy, gold was kind of an automatic decision, but there is something about adding gold to pretty much anything. There's the whole small metals movement to cover staples or nailheads in gold and, therefore make them precious, or, the combination of concrete and gold leaf has always been something that I've, been really drawn to show, or maybe to make somebody look at it a little closer and look at it as more precious than what they generally would. So the gold was also kind of something to make myself take it seriously, because the gold was very, very expensive. I saved up for a few months to buy all the gold that this project took. And so that was the start of my process, having to do without some things so that I could make this one object that would be displayed for, 5 hours and then be completely destroyed and have no longer, any of its original beauty to it.
What about your involvement with this Santeria group? Well, I'd like to hear just more about it in general, but I'm also curious if they are not only aware of your baking and actions within what they're doing, but are they aware of what you're interested in as an artist and how it relates to that?
Absolutely. They are. A lot of the people in my community come to my shows, and one of my god sisters was here for the opening and saw my work. They generally are very supportive of what I do because they know the I would say devotion and respect that I put towards materials. It's a very material-based religion. It's something that relies heavily on blood and on objects. So they can see what I'm doing with my process. They may not always get it, but they can appreciate that what I'm doing is part of who I am, and that's really kind of the whole focus of the religion, to be to work towards being the best person you can be in improving your character. My work before this, most of my work in graduate school is about Santeria. It was about our bodies and animal bodies and the life and death that hangs in balance when we are preparing them to eat or we're preparing them for our use. They are generally used as a substitute for our own bodies in a way that allows us to transmute ourselves. For example, I had a show with my collaborator Katrina Chamberlain and Joseph Belknap at the Cultural Center, I guess it was in 2009, where we went up to Wisconsin and we slaughtered a sheep. And while we were up there, we butchered the sheep and we rendered all of the fat off the sheep and made soap. And then, we made 160 pounds of soap off of the sheet, and we brought it back to the city and we washed people's feet with the soap. And that was our way of going out. We were all, all kind of city bred, but going out to the country and experiencing death firsthand and being responsible for death, and then bringing it back to the city as a purified body that we could then experience in a very intimate way with the people of the city.
Much blood was in the cake, and how did you get it out of you?
That's also a funny story. There wasn't that much blood. It was at most it was about 2 tablespoons, and getting it out was not very easy. When I used to do projects, I was very efficient. I could get, I was very clean, had all the right tools. I was working as a professional body piercer all through school, so it was very handy for me to do these things. But I hadn't been pierced or tattooed in at least 5 years, and so I'm at home. I'm doing this project. I'm like, okay, I'm really prepared to make this blood hard candy. I just need some blood. All right, no problem. And then I decided to be lazy and just grab my tools and go for an area that was already scarred, because I've got plenty of scar tissue to work with. I didn't need any more. And I just kind of, just made a little opening, but it was very, very, very painful because I was going through big, thick scars. And it didn't produce as much blood as it probably should have. So it took me a really long time to get that amount of blood. And then, I make my candy and everything's going well. And then I wake up that night and I just have this horrendous nosebleed. And there's just like blood. I'm like, so, but that's just, a cosmic joke on me.
Was that part of it? Like, would it have been the same? I mean, obviously not the same, but would it have been like fair or okay to, like, if you had like a friend that was a professional phlebotomist who was like, oh, I just have this, clean syringe that we use at the doctor's office, and I'm just gonna like nip off and like.
I would have appreciated the efficiency much, much more.
Yeah.
But you didn't? Did you rule that out, or was it just like?
I did. Funny enough, I really hate having my blood drawn because I don't have a thing about blood or pain. I have a thing about veins, and so they freak me out. But yeah, so I didn't even consider it in the least.
So you had to have like peripheral blood and not like your actual like vein blood.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Because I'm kind of a big sissy about all that.
but yet you cut yourself open.
and that was nothing. Like, it didn't bother me in the least. Except for that it hurt, and I forgot that stuff hurt. And if I would have gone for like kind of clean, unmarked flesh, it wouldn't have been nearly as much of a problem. But I was trying to, I guess, take the easy route, and it turned out to be really difficult. So, but it just kind of, again, I think was a sign that my focus has shifted so completely from when I was younger, and because before it was all about the wound and then what came from the wound, and the wound was so completely secondary. I was just concerned about making sure that my sugar melted correctly, and I want to say that's a sign of maturity, but I'm not entirely sure it is. So,
Can we go back to Pentecostal faith healing?
Sure.
For a second. So you talked about, and I might be sort of wrongly paraphrasing this, so step in at any point, but I think you talked about wanting to see something that you couldn't, or handle something that you couldn't see.
Right.
What did you feel like you were missing during those?
Well, one thing about Pentecostals is that they don't like objects. They don't have altars. They don't have like their communion items are not consecrated. Everything is just bare bones because they think objects are the trappings that distract people from God. And what happens in the services, at least in the culture that my family comes from, not all Pentecostals are this way, but it's the Spirit of God comes down and they speak in tongues, or the Holy Spirit comes down and they speak in tongues, and they make a gesture of raising their hands to the sky. And I was always wondering what they're gesturing towards, what they're trying to touch, because I couldn't see a damn thing. And I really, really, really wanted to. And so that was something that was very traumatic, is a strong word, but it left me disgruntled that perhaps I didn't have the same gifts or the same calling for, a spiritual existence. So, or maybe God wasn't reaching out to me, so I kind of had to figure it out on my own.
Yeah, I guess it's really interesting to me, and it's something I want. I just am interested in, as far as like knowing you as a person and knowing what your practice is like, which to me, in a lot of ways, is scientific. Like a lot of the things that you undertake to me are almost like scientific experiments, when you're like, I don't know what is going to happen. Here's almost like a control, and then here's a process, and we're going to go through this process. We're going to arrive at something, and sort of through that, find that the spirit or what is missing, or handle it, or really break it down into sort of like components where it's like, if it's here, if it's under this cup, we're going to shuffle this up a number of times so that wherever that point is, we're going to find it. And it, I guess I don't know, that's really interesting to me, because when I was a kid, my parents made me go to church too. They weren't really religious, but they thought it would sort of help make me a better person. And I would drive to church every Sunday. And I kind of had like a very similar reaction. It wasn't like people speaking in tongues, but I was just like, I don't get what's happening. Like I was like, am I missing something? But I never then thought like, oh, I'm gonna investigate this, or that it's like I'm a spiritual person. It basically just like derailed my spirituality completely, because I was just like, what are they doing? Why is everyone doing this? Why do they feel this way? And I'm just sitting here like, I don't see this thing. I don't feel this thing. So I don't really know. That's not a good question, but I'm
but I get exactly what you're talking about. Because a lot of my work is set up as laboratories or as things that are, if you get down to it, are really trying to look for this this proof of the spiritual being. And artist and me aside, I have to say I was really kind of disappointed in the way that this project turned out, because I was expecting, something really concrete to come out of this whole process. And I have something, but it's nothing like I expected. And while that is kind of exciting, because I couldn't pre-plan of what I was going to get out of it, it's also kind of disappointing that it wasn't as, I didn't get something.
What did you want?
I wanted clean, pristine, perfect, like alcohol. Like, just the, with 190 proof alcohol with, 5% water. But I did not get it. And maybe it means it just needs more work. Maybe it means that this, whole project isn't over and I can't just like wrap it up and do something else now. But yeah, I was really expecting something a little more miraculous to end up in the bottle. But I guess it did complete. It went from hot pink to bright yellow, so I guess that is something.
Do you know if you can extract color from gold? Is that possible?
Extract it from gold?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. We were talking about though, but we're not.
Yeah, you can go on
the gold. There are definitely some like alchemical experiments to extract or use gold to make different things change colors. But I'm not entirely sure that that's what happened here.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the relationship between purification, as you describe it in your work, and the material presence in this room?
Sure. Yeah. To me, purification isn't getting rid of what's dirty. It's just getting down to the essentials, distilling down to something that, removing distractions from it. And so the objects in the room were originally brought in here just to help me facilitate completely converting this, meringue and blood cake that I made into something that got rid of absolutely everything except for, the pure essence of it. And again, I don't think I achieved that yet. I think it needs more, because that material in that bottle is not pure. There's there's nothing pure about that. But I think maybe it's a little closer than what I started with.
It's not pure because of the color?
The color, the smell, the it doesn't burn very well. If it was a higher proof, it would ignite and burn very strongly. It does ignite, but it doesn't hold a flame for very long, which means that there's other materials still in it that are prohibiting it from flaming. So, because I thought that'd be really awesome to just have a huge alcohol fire for my talk, but it wasn't very impressive.
I'm still pretty impressed. This is a cake.
It is a cake. It's a cake in a bottle now. Yes. There wasn't. The only thing that got strained out of it was the gold and some of the egg solids. Everything else was converted by yeast into alcohol, and that's what we got from it. So that's probably a cup, about 8 ounces. And when I filtered, or when I melted down the cake, it made about 3 gallons of liquid syrup. And then when I filtered out all the solids from it, it was about 1 gallon. So I'm wondering how much I'll get when I distill it again, maybe in a more closed circuit distillation chain instead of this model that's based more off of the moonshine still. Get more laboratory equipment to narrow it down a little.
I guess this might be related to Min's question somewhat, but it's something I've always, we talked about a little when we were setting the show up, but I guess how do you think through this sort of aesthetics of what you're laying out? Because it seems, in a part of me, there's something that I really appreciate, especially someone who is helping you move stuff in here, where you're whatever it is, it's fine. Here's what I need to make this process happen. But then there are other things where you were super particular about, here's this formation, this, I want to have this shape of these things laid out. How does that factor into your thought process? Or
when we were moving in, you kind of quoted back to me something I said that I never really, heard myself say, but it is a very good, distillation of what I do, and it's that I don't necessarily care how it looks, but I care what it is, and it's the material that I'm most excited by. It's the process, and that the process works. I want it to work. When I was here the other day, the way I had, used my education as a visual artist to set up my still was not functioning as a still. It was blocking the way that the steam was rising. It wasn't distilling. So I had to completely rearrange it, and it looked like a complete mess in here. But when I did that, it made the process work. And so, I could have left it, as this image that I thought was really kind of captivating of, this tall still being flanked perfectly by heat and a receptacle, but it really kind of turned into me having the folding chair down there and the clearing a table to do this and finding something to catch the water that was coming off of the melting ice in order to make it produce what I wanted it to. As far as materials go, in my relationship to materials, is that I think a bottle of liquid can be one of the most significant forms of art there is. When I make a substance, I want that substance to be able to affect somebody internally. I want it to make their heartbeat faster. I want it to make I want to make them giddy. I want my art to have an effect on people that they can feel inside of themselves more than with just their eyes or with their mind. So that's what I'm concerned with, not necessarily the visual impact. I do love the visual as an artist, but
it's so interesting with the science experiment, because the transaction or the charge of the visual is a sort of transaction of faith.
mm-hmm.
Like, you presume that, like, the painting or whatever it is operating in the mind or corpus of the viewer in this way, but you have to sort of, like, Rorschach it, just sort of presume that it's happening. And I think the test of this, and actually provoking people to eat your work, is really sort of, because I think in the integration of the show, I was like, what does this have to do with, like, the gallery as a site, or, like, what's the art part? Like,
mm-hmm.
I get it, but I was wondering, or I think I get it, but at the opening, certainly I was wondering about, like, analogies about value, and obviously other ingestible artworks of the latter half of the 20th century. Is that what it is? Is that the gift of it, right? Like, it's in your mouth and then gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that the analogy of the experience of art in general that you're making? Or is it, because I'm interested in this not being an eccentric practice. I feel like the poetics of it, the possible analogies of it, can extrapolate out, and I guess it's nice to hear you, like, the science goes all the way down. Like, you have to actually ingest it. I'm not going to just set up the condition for something to happen. Could you talk about, like, the art part, or, like, how you think this relates to? I mean, like, I think that, like, it's solid. You're an artist. I'm not casting doubt on that. I'm just sort of like, I wonder what, because you were saying at the opening too that, like, a lot of, or, like, some galleries won't show work like this. It's like, what do you think? I guess my question. Yeah, what do you think work like this is?
That's a great question.
What's the question?
I think that work like this is just another example of what art is, and that is, it is somebody toiling or working towards something that is going to manifest something into reality that doesn't already exist, for one, something that might matter to somebody, two, and three, have a profound and transformative effect on either oneself or on your community. The people who come across it have something is different about them, when they see it. I can remember the first time I saw, pictures of Eva Hesse's sculptures, and they're, visually they're really kind of awful, but they completely changed my life, and it was just because there was this woman who was baking rubber in muffin tins in her apartment and then attaching cord to it. It completely rearranged my outlook on the world. And while I don't think my work is there yet, I hope that the things that I make other people want to create, whether it's a painting or a drawing. I really just want to make something that inspires people to create something out of, what wasn't there before, something that they completely birthed from themselves.
It's interesting too, the two things, the Pentecostal faith healing that you watched when you were young, and then the Hess example, both of these are things that you took in through your eyes, but that fundamentally, you even said it fundamentally changed my outlook. Like you're using the metaphor of seeing. And I mean, I don't know, I do think that you can be fundamentally changed by taking and that we do take things in through our eyes, and that they get, that they get insidiously inside us, and then we don't know what, then we have this toxic thing that's in us, that came from the outside, but just through the eyeballs. And it's this funny kind of paradox that, like, in some way you're trying to work something out of yourself that you took in through the eyes that you don't know. Like I guess that's interesting to me. Like, what kind of a boundary is this, and that you're willing to slice into your flesh, but that you doubt this experience in some way that's like sort of hard to get a handle on. So that's something I think is fascinating. And then the other thing is that your description of the essence of purification, part of it was the elimination of distraction. And I think, and interestingly, when I think about my understanding of alchemists, or the history of sort of medieval alchemists, I guess, I don't really understand contemporary alchemical practices, but I feel like it's all about distraction in some way. About a kind of engagement with it or something, or like what's going on. I mean, maybe I'm just like picturing alchemical laboratories being sort of like overrun with, rats and books and compasses and stuff, and it's like, because I think that the obliqueness of an investigation is where, for me, it becomes really interesting. So it's like it's like everywhere you're looking that you can get. So you're putting all this focus into this activity, but I'm like, there's something else going on in your life where this is really where the transformation is taking place. Like but it's probably never happening in the thing that you're. It's never happening in this. Right. But I bet there's something going on, like in some other relationship where it's where the distraction is. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's exactly the place. It's like that fly that buzzes around your head, and you're like, no, I'm trying to focus and have a conversation, but the fly is trying to say, like, hi, this is the thing that you should be paying attention to. I don't know. So it's fascinating to take something like alchemy, which is in so many ways about. Okay, here's what I'm trying to say. There's two different kinds of attention, right? Focused attention. And then like dispersed attention. And I guess I'm wondering where your dispersed attention goes when your focused attention is being so scientific. Because the alchemists, in my understanding, are they're pre the separation of philosophy, psychology, science, etc. They're pre the separation of the two sides of the brain. They're pre, rational versus feeling, or any of these sort of dichotomies. Like, there is a sense of the investigation as whole or something. So it's super confusing to me to reduce.
I do.
I'm gonna stop that one, but.
No, I think that's really interesting, especially when you say when you bring up the visual, because I rarely show videos in my work. I rarely take videos, and I prefer photographs, and so. Most of my work that are these experiments live on in photographs, and there's much like Chris was saying earlier, there are a lot of humble materials and sometimes a lot of humble setups, but when I photograph the processes that are happening, my purest intent in that process is to let somebody else see what I find so special about the process. A PowerPoint is very difficult to, project on a wall. It's very difficult to look at. But when I look at the photographs of the alcohol bubbling up, the vapors bubbling up, but the water staying still, that is so incredibly magical to me, to see this separation. And that's where my visual process comes into it. And when I am focused on the science of it, I'm looking for clues of this extraordinary part.
Like that thing. I mean, I sat on Saturday and this thing, this jug that has this little, and I kept sort of being like, it's percolating. I kept trying to find the right word for what it was doing, but it was going glug every once in a while, and it was like something had
burped.
Burped? Maybe burped? Yeah, it felt like some kind of transference from down here to up here, but I couldn't decide how that was. So I kept thinking about a coffee percolator and how I understand something about how pressure, you put the water in the top, you put the water in the bottom, and the pressure brings the water up to the top, and how I've always thought that was sort of, it's exciting. You know, it's like you create a vacuum. I always think, like, is there a vacuum? I'm not much of a scientist, but yeah, the glug, the burp, or whatever. Is that exciting to you?
The glug was the symbol and the outcome, or the proof that life existed in that jug. The yeast, as it broke down the sugars, produced both alcohol and carbon dioxide. So the bubbles were carbon dioxide leaving, and the water is in the tube to keep other things from coming back in. So bugs and mold could not get to this living thing that was in the jug that was still growing.
Or oxygen even, right?
Or oxygen.
Right.
Okay.
But you can't seal it? Why don't you just...
Because it would explode.
So
because it's producing carbon dioxide.
So something is able to get out.
Right, the carbon dioxide
leaves
is leaving,
water.
but nothing can come back in.
Gotcha.
It's a water lock. And so that's how I monitored the process by videotaping and timing the glugs, like how often they were happening. I could say, well, yeah, like it was happening every second or every 2 seconds on the first day, and at the end of the week it was happening once a minute. And so it was my proof that something was happening inside.
Like contractions, when you started counting, measuring contractions.
Exactly.
I think I'm stuck on the part where you said you don't care what it looks like.
I mean that's obviously a fallacy.
Yeah, because I mean, like I think this would be a very stagnant object if it weren't for the condensation inside.
And to me, the condensation is one of the most beautiful parts.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, and also Camille's potential. I think like it's like that's what activates this object for me. So like I was just like I don't know about the sculpture. What about what about the things in here? Like,
Yeah.
They all matter, no?
They do, and definitely visually they matter. But to me, it's mostly, what I can use to produce the desired object or the desired function.
It does seem to be somewhat analogous, though, to the alchemical process in the sense that the physical process is a visual sign of a spiritual process, right? And that's part of certain traditions of alchemy. So, I guess in the same way, like, you need these to show the alchemical process. So
Right.
they are incidentally, strewn about based on functions, but their visualness is also how we know, these things are happening.
Right. And, it'd be a lie to say that they weren't considered, it could have been any number of materials or objects that would have done the same thing. But some things, I chose purely for aesthetics. But they had to be completely functional. Nothing was here with the intent of being ornamental. There was some equipment I had here that I never had a use for because it didn't require it like I thought it might. But those were cleared away, but I realized that they were, obsolete.
I guess I think this is, once again, tangentially related, but I started thinking about it when Molly and Ning were talking, but some of your work, and this project in particular, and I would never claim to be an expert on performance art or the history of performance art. A lot of performance that I've seen, there's a sort of consideration to the viewer as almost like spectator, you know, and in your work, I think a lot of what is interesting to me, at least to think about, is when I've entered a lot of your work as a spectator, I enter it almost as like James is the avatar. Like I have to enter it through you, your experience, some relationship to your body that then may not actually have a relationship to my body unless I'm ingesting something and putting it in my body and something's happening outside the space. But even like the project, the Cultural Center, you know, you, Katrina, and whoever else like killed goat, lamb, sheep, whatever it was, and sort of rendered the fat into it. So, and then this process happened, but in order for me to understand that, I had to sort of like enter your brain space, or like this is, all this other stuff happened, I'm aware that it happened, or like this process is happening and James is sort of deeply involved in it, and I'm not there, or I'm sort of witnessing the process, and it's not meant to, like part of it seems like it's off limits, or I don't know. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense, and I've never really come to terms with whether it's a problem or if it's. I don't even think I would call it a strength or an attribute or of my work. I know that it definitely just is. It's no matter what I'm making. You know, I do have a strong consideration for the audience, but it also, if it's not working for me, it doesn't work. In my book, I have a hard time producing anything that isn't something that I'm completely fascinated by, and yeah, that can definitely be hard to convey sometimes. And so what I attempt to do is to grab the audience by the hand and bring them along with me, with, you know, hey, check this out, you know, look how incredibly cool this is, or incredibly fascinating. And if the bubbles don't excite them, then it's, you know, my job to try to explain to them why they are excited by them.
Anybody else? Any closing comments? Have we shared enough, James?
I think so. You know, this was a really fantastic conversation. I was so excited to do this project here because it is a very rare opportunity to be able to do, to complete a process in a gallery, and especially a process that isn't necessarily riveting 24 hours a day. So I think that this, you know, this wouldn't have been the same thing if I would have carried it out in my own home. It wouldn't have been anything that I would even be interested in. I think that having people come along with me for this whole process has been really one of the most influential parts to the entire piece, especially, or at least to me, and the final outcome, which is, again, not necessarily a final outcome, I don't think.
I think it's fine if it looks like urine. I don't know. I feel like it seems so capital R romantic to want to have this completely pure thing where the process is unpredictable, and in some ways, like, I know that probably you see that as a marker on your spirituality or your spirit or something, that your spirit is like cloudy and, you know, smells kind of foul and doesn't burn pure or something. But I don't know. I think if I was going through this process and I arrived at the completely pure alcohol that burned with whatever, I would think something was wrong.
Right.
I would be like, that's not me.
Right.
You know, where's
this is like an incredibly personal liquid.
Yeah.
Like, where else does this liquid exist in the world?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, which I think is, I don't know, it makes me feel like we have more in common than.
Well, I think that's totally right, Chris. Just like one of the, I guess, most fascinating things you said so far, James, is just that it's not what it looks like, it's what it is. And I feel like this kind of deferral from the object or from the sculptural elements or from the machine of the experiment is like, it looks like urine. It's like, yeah, but the work is like everywhere but there. That's just, I mean, it's the container, it's the result of this process. And like, you put it in the cup holder in your car and just drive away. And the work, I don't know, this whole eye-mouth anti-visual performance art thing is extremely interesting to me. I mean, because part of the drama of killing a sheep is like the visual of killing a sheep, which I've never done, and just like not having that be contained in the residue of the experience at all. It's yours. And Chris is right. You have to sort of like imaginatively extrapolate what that may have looked like, but that's not at all what it is. So if you're setting up these expectations and then sort of like delivering something else kind of underneath it, which is kind of an act of faith on your part, or trust in your community, which is really interesting.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.